The helicopter's rotors made their final desperate spins as smoke rose into the Afghan sky. Staff Sergeant Amanda Hayes would wake up alone, injured and lost. But this was just the beginning of a survival story that would end with an impossible shot that changed everything. Welcome to Beneath Words Stories. Before we share this powerful story of courage and precision, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories of real heroes deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. October 5th, 2019, 14:30 hours. The UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter flew low over the mountainous terrain of Afghanistan's Kunar province. Inside sat 6 members of an elite special operations unit, all experienced, all focused, all planning to go home. Staff Sergeant Amanda Hayes sat in the back left seat, her M24 SWS sniper rifle secured between her knees. At 28, she was the youngest member of the team, but her reputation preceded her. In 3 years of deployment, she'd never missed a target beyond 1,200 meters. Her teammates called her Ghost, not because she was invisible, but because her bullets seemed to appear from nowhere. Captain Michael Brooks, the team leader, spoke through the comm system over the rotor noise. 15 minutes to LZ, people. Intelligence says we've got a clean extraction. Humanitarian workers have been held for 6 days. 3 Americans, 2 British nationals, 1 Canadian doctor. No room for error. Sergeant First Class Danny Wilson, the team medic, checked his gear one final time. What's the security situation on the ground, Captain? Local militia, maybe 20 fighters. Standard AK-47s, nothing sophisticated. Should be routine. Brooks's voice carried the confidence of a man who'd run dozens of similar operations. Amanda adjusted her scope covers and ran through her pre-mission checklist. Wind speed, humidity, elevation, all the variables that could mean the difference between life and death at long range. She'd studied the terrain maps for hours. The compound where the hostages were held sat in a valley, surrounded by rocky hills that would provide excellent overwatch positions. Ghost, you'll have primary sniper support from the ridgeline, Brooks continued. Estimated range to target 800 meters, clean sight lines, minimal wind interference. Amanda nodded. Copy that, sir. 800 meters is a short walk. The helicopter banked left, following the valley contours. Below them, the Afghan landscape stretched endlessly. Brown hills dotted with sparse vegetation, ancient trade routes carved into mountainsides, and somewhere in that vastness, 6 innocent people waiting for rescue. Sergeant Martinez, their explosives expert, was reviewing building schematics on his tablet. Compound has 3 main structures. Intel suggests hostages are in the center building, 2nd floor. 2 guard positions visible from satellite. Weather looks good, called out their communications specialist, Corporal Jackson. Clear skies, minimal wind, perfect conditions for overwatch. Amanda smiled slightly. Perfect conditions. In her experience, conditions were never perfect. Something always went wrong. Wind shifted unexpectedly. Targets moved at the wrong moment. Equipment failed when you needed it most. The key was adapting, staying calm, making the shot that mattered. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. 2 minutes to LZ, beginning descent. That's when everything changed. The RPG came from nowhere, a streak of smoke and fire that seemed to materialize from the rocks below. Amanda saw it for maybe half a second before impact, just enough time for her training to kick in. She grabbed her rifle and pulled it tight against her body, protecting the optics. The explosion hit the helicopter's tail rotor with devastating precision. The Black Hawk immediately began spinning, the pilot fighting desperately for control as they lost altitude rapidly. "Brace for impact!" Brooks shouted over the screaming metal and failing engines. Amanda felt the world spinning around her. Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of her teammates. Wilson thrown against the opposite wall, Martinez's equipment scattered across the cabin floor, Jackson frantically trying to send a mayday call. The helicopter hit the mountainside at 90 miles per hour. The last thing Amanda remembered before losing consciousness was the sound, not the crash, not the breaking metal, but the sudden complete silence that followed. Amanda Hayes woke up to the smell of aviation fuel and burning electronics. Her head pounded, her left shoulder felt like it was on fire, and when she tried to move, sharp pain shot through her ribs. But she was alive. The helicopter lay on its side, wedged between two large boulders about halfway up a steep mountainside. The main cabin was crushed, but the section where she'd been sitting had somehow remained partially intact. Emergency sunlight streamed through a crack in the hull above her. "Brooks," she called out, her voice hoarse. "Wilson?" Anyone. Silence. Amanda forced herself to move, ignoring the pain in her shoulder and ribs. She could smell fuel leaking. The wreckage could explode at any moment. She had to get out. Her rifle was still strapped to her back, miraculously undamaged. Her pack had split open, scattering supplies across the twisted metal floor, but she managed to gather water, emergency rations, first aid supplies, and most importantly, her scope and ammunition. It took 20 minutes to crawl through the wreckage and find her teammates. Captain Brooks had died on impact, his neck broken. Martinez and Jackson were trapped under debris, also dead. Wilson was still breathing when she found him, but barely. "Wilson, Danny, stay with me." He opened his eyes, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Ghost, that you? I'm here. You're going to be okay." But even as she said it, Amanda could see the massive internal trauma. Wilson was dying. He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "The mission, hostages, don't talk, save your energy. Radios, destroyed, no extraction." His breathing was becoming more labored. "You have to complete the mission." "Wilson, there is no mission. We're done. I need to get you medical attention." He shook his head weakly. "Those people, they're going to die if someone doesn't." He coughed, blood spattering his lips. "You're the only one left, Ghost. You're the only one who can make that shot." Amanda felt tears she didn't know she was holding back. "What shot?" "The compound is kilometers away. I don't even know where we are." Wilson managed a weak smile. "You're Amanda Hayes. You don't miss." He closed his eyes. "Promise me." "Danny, promise me." She squeezed his hand. "I promise." Sergeant Danny Wilson died 3 minutes later. Amanda sat in the wreckage for a long time after that, holding her teammate's hand as it grew cold. Around her, the Afghan mountains stretched endlessly in every direction. She had no radio, no extraction plan, no backup. She was completely alone, but she'd made a promise. She spent the next hour gathering everything useful from the crash site. Her M24 rifle was functional, though the bipod was bent. She had 47 rounds of .300 Winchester Magnum ammunition. Her rangefinder was cracked but working. Most importantly, her scope had survived. A loopholed Mark IV that she'd personally zeroed at 1,000 meters. The emergency GPS unit was damaged, but it gave her a rough position before dying completely. She was approximately 12 kilometers northeast of the target compound, much further than the planned 800-meter overwatch position. As the sun began to set, Amanda realized the full scope of her situation. She was injured, alone, and miles from her target. The hostages were still being held, and no one was coming to rescue them. The mission that was supposed to be routine had become impossible. But impossible was what Amanda Hayes did best. She began climbing. The first night was the hardest. Amanda's ribs were definitely cracked, possibly broken. Her left shoulder was severely bruised, limiting her range of motion. Every step up the rocky terrain sent shockwaves of pain through her body, but she kept moving. The mountains of Afghanistan are unforgiving in October. Daytime temperatures reach 80 degrees Fahrenheit, but nights drop below freezing. Amanda had survived the crash, but exposure could kill her just as easily. She moved slowly, carefully, using her rifle as a walking stick when the terrain became too steep. The bent bipod actually helped, giving her better grip on the rocky surfaces. She followed ridgelines when possible, staying high to avoid potential patrols, but also to get better vantage points for navigation. By dawn of the second day, she'd covered maybe 3 kilometers. At this rate, it would take her 4 days to reach a position where she could even see the target compound. The hostages didn't have 4 days. That's when Amanda made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Instead of continuing the slow, careful approach along the ridgelines, she decided to cut directly across the valley floor. It was faster, but it was also where the enemy patrols would be. She almost didn't see the first patrol, 3 men with AK-47s, walking casually along what appeared to be a game trail. Amanda dropped behind a cluster of rocks just as the lead man turned in her direction. She lay perfectly still for 20 minutes while they passed, close enough that she could hear their conversation in Pashto. The second patrol found her tracks. Amanda realized she was being followed around noon on the second day. She'd taken shelter under an overhang to rest and treat her injuries when she heard voices echoing off the canyon walls below. They were tracking her, and they were good at it. For the next 6 hours, it became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Amanda would move forward, try to mask her trail, and find concealment. The patrol would follow, sometimes getting within a few hundred meters of her position before losing the track and having to backtrack. As the sun set on her second day alone, Amanda realized she had to make another impossible choice. She could continue running, probably getting caught within the next day or two, or she could eliminate the patrol. At 400 meters, in fading light, with a damaged rifle and injured shoulder, it should have been impossible. But Amanda Hayes had never missed a shot that mattered. The first target went down instantly. The second started running before Amanda's bullet reached him. It didn't matter. The third man managed to return fire, his AK-47 rounds sparking off rocks 20 feet to her left, before Amanda's third shot silenced him permanently. Suddenly, the mountains were quiet again. Amanda felt sick. These weren't enemy combatants in a firefight. These were men tracking her who might have been farmers or shopkeepers a week ago, but they were also men who would have prevented her from completing her mission. 6 innocent people were depending on her. Danny Wilson had died trusting her. She couldn't fail them now. She spent that night in a cave, treating her wounds and planning her approach. According to her calculations, she was now approximately 7 kilometers from the target compound. Too far for a normal shot, but she was running out of time. The next morning, Amanda began looking for the perfect shooting position. On the morning of October 8th, 3 days after the crash, Amanda Hayes found herself lying prone on a narrow ridge, staring through her rifle scope at a compound 2,847 meters away. She'd spent hours calculating the shot. At this distance, a .300 Winchester Magnum bullet would take nearly 4 seconds to reach its target. In that time, the Earth's rotation would affect the bullet's path. Wind speed, air density, temperature, every variable mattered. Through her scope, she could see the compound clearly. 3 buildings arranged around a central courtyard, guards walking patrol patterns that she'd been observing for 6 hours, and in the second-floor window of the central building, occasionally, the silhouette of someone who didn't belong, one of the hostages. The situation had deteriorated since the failed rescue. Amanda had monitored radio chatter using equipment salvaged from her crashed helicopter. The hostage-takers were getting nervous. They'd killed one of the captives, the Canadian doctor, yesterday as a warning. The remaining 5 would be executed at sunset if their demands weren't met. Sunset was in 4 hours. At 2,847 meters, this would be one of the longest successful sniper shots in military history. The current record, held by a British sniper in Afghanistan, was 2,475 meters. But Amanda wasn't trying to break records. She was trying to save lives. The target was the compound's commander, a tall man in his 40s who had appeared several times throughout the morning, always accompanied by 2 bodyguards. Intelligence suggested he was the decision-maker. Remove him, and the remaining guards would likely panic, giving any rescue force the advantage they needed. But Amanda Hayes wasn't a rescue force. She was one woman, alone on a mountain with 1 rifle and a handful of bullets. The wind was the biggest variable. At ground level near the compound, flags hung limp, maybe 3 to 5 miles per hour. But here on the ridge, gusts were hitting 15 to 20 miles per hour. The bullet's trajectory would be affected differently at various points along its 4-second journey. Amanda had been in position since before dawn, mapping wind patterns, studying the target's routine, calculating angles. Her shoulder ached from holding the rifle steady. Her ribs sent sharp pains through her chest every time she breathed. But she remained motionless, patient, waiting for the perfect moment. At 13:47 hours, the target appeared again. This time, he stood in the compound's courtyard for an extended period, apparently giving instructions to his men. Amanda watched through her scope as guards dispersed to various positions. This might be preparation for the evening executions. She had 1 shot. If she missed, the sound of the bullet impact would alert the entire compound. The the hostages would be killed immediately. If she hit but didn't eliminate the target cleanly, the result would be the same. Amanda controlled her breathing, settling deeper into her shooting position. Through the scope, the target appeared impossibly small, a figure roughly the size of her thumbnail held at arm's length. At this distance, she was aiming at a man she couldn't really see, trusting in physics and mathematics and 3 years of training. The wind died. For maybe 10 seconds, the air became perfectly still. Amanda felt it rather than saw it, the subtle change in pressure, the way sound carried differently. She placed the crosshairs slightly left and high of the target, compensating for bullet drop and Earth's rotation. She exhaled slowly, settled her finger on the trigger, and squeezed. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, sending fresh pain through her injured ribs. The shot echoed off canyon walls like thunder. 2,847 meters away, the .300 Winchester Magnum bullet traveled at nearly 2,500 feet per second, fighting gravity and air resistance and planetary physics. 4 seconds felt like forever. Through her scope, Amanda watched the target suddenly collapse. One moment he was standing, giving orders to his men. The next moment, he was on the ground, motionless. Chaos erupted in the compound. Guards ran in random directions, shouting, pointing at the buildings around them, but never looking toward the distant ridge where Amanda lay. They had no idea where the shot had come from, but Amanda couldn't celebrate yet. She had to confirm that her one impossible shot had actually achieved its purpose, freeing the hostages. For the next 2 hours, she watched through her scope as the situation unfolded. Guards argued among themselves, clearly lacking leadership. Some abandoned their posts entirely. Others seemed paralyzed by indecision. The careful organization of the compound dissolved into confusion. At 16:23 hours, Amanda saw what she'd been hoping for. A white cloth appeared in the second-floor window, a shirt or towel being waved back and forth. The hostages were signaling. They were alive, and they were asking for help. 23 minutes later, she heard the distinctive sound of helicopters approaching from the south. A rescue force, probably launched immediately after her shot was heard by intelligence assets in the area. Through her scope, Amanda watched as 2 Black Hawks landed in the compound courtyard. Special operations soldiers poured out, moving with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, 5 figures were being escorted from the central building toward the waiting helicopters. The hostages were safe. Amanda Hayes had made the impossible shot that saved 5 innocent lives. But as she watched the rescue helicopters disappear over the southern ridge, she realized her own ordeal was far from over. She was still alone, still injured, still stranded in enemy territory with no way home. Staff Sergeant Amanda Hayes spent 4 more days alone in the mountains before she was found. The search had begun immediately after satellite assets detected her muzzle flash from the 2,847-meter shot. Military intelligence had initially been baffled. Someone with extraordinary skill had eliminated the compound commander from an impossible distance, enabling the hostage rescue. But according to all official records, no American sniper units were operating in that sector. It wasn't until investigators examined the crashed helicopter that they discovered Amanda's survival. The bodies of her 5 teammates were recovered, but hers was not among them. Search and rescue teams were dispatched immediately. On October 12th, 5 days after her impossible shot and 7 days after the crash, a search helicopter spotted Amanda's signal mirror flashing from a ridge approximately 3 kilometers from her shooting position. She was dehydrated, exhausted, and suffering from exposure, but alive. The rescue medic who treated her during the flight back to base later said he'd never seen anything like it. She was beat up, sure, but when we asked what happened, she just said, "Mission complete." Like walking alone through enemy territory for a week was just another day at the office. The story of Amanda Hayes' impossible shot spread quickly through special operations communities. 2,847 meters, 1 shot, perfect conditions created by a combination of skill, desperation, and circumstances that might never be repeated. But the official reports were classified. The hostage rescue was attributed to intelligence assets and tactical response teams. The record-breaking sniper shot was buried in files that would remain sealed for decades. Amanda was quietly awarded the Silver Star and transferred to a training position in Colorado. For 3 years, only a handful of people knew the truth about what happened in those Afghan mountains. Amanda herself never spoke about it publicly. She'd made the shot that mattered, saved the lives that needed saving. That was enough. Then, in 2022, one of the rescued hostages, Dr. Emily Richardson, a British humanitarian worker, published a memoir about her experience. In it, she mentioned hearing a single distant gunshot, followed by chaos among her captors. She wrote about seeing a figure on a far ridge through binoculars one of the guards had dropped. Military historians began investigating. Declassified satellite imagery confirmed the impossible. Someone had made a successful shot at nearly 2,850 meters in combat conditions. Ballistics experts called it physically improbable but mathematically possible. The truth finally emerged when Sergeant Danny Wilson's family was allowed to review his medical records. In his final report, dictated to medics before his death, Wilson had mentioned Staff Sergeant Hayes proceeding with Overwatch mission despite catastrophic mission failure. Amanda Hayes was tracked down at Fort Carson, Colorado, where she was serving as a sniper instructor. When approached by military journalists, she initially refused to comment. "I did my job," she said. "My teammates died doing theirs. That's the only story that matters." But pressure mounted. The shot was being called the most remarkable feat of marksmanship in modern military history. Experts wanted to study her technique. Historians wanted to document the event. Finally, in late 2022, Amanda agreed to a single interview with Military Times magazine. She spoke for less than 20 minutes, focusing mainly on her fallen teammates and the hostages who had survived. When asked about the technical aspects of the 2,847-meter shot, she was characteristically brief. "I calculated the variables, controlled what I could control, and trusted my training. The shot worked because it had to work." When pressed for details about her 4-day survival alone in enemy territory, she simply said, "You do what you have to do. 5 people were depending on me. Danny Wilson died trusting me to complete the mission. Failure wasn't an option." The interview concluded with Amanda's only emotional moment. When asked what she wanted people to remember about the event, her voice softened slightly. Captain Brooks, Sergeant Martinez, Corporal Jackson, and Sergeant First Class Wilson. They died serving their country and trying to save innocent lives. I just happened to be the one who survived to finish what we started. Today, Staff Sergeant Amanda Hayes continues to serve as a sniper instructor. She has trained dozens of the military's most elite marksmen and women, but she has never attempted another shot beyond 2,000 meters. When asked why, she gives the same answer every time. "That shot was perfect because it had to be perfect. I'm not interested in breaking records. I'm interested in bringing soldiers home alive." The official record for longest successful sniper shot in combat remains classified, attributed only to an American service member in Afghanistan, 2019. But in the quiet communities of special operations soldiers, everyone knows the truth. Staff Sergeant Amanda Hayes didn't just survive the impossible. She made the impossible shot that saved 5 lives and proved that sometimes, when everything goes wrong, one person with the right training and the will to succeed can change everything. Amanda Hayes never sought recognition for what she did in those Afghan mountains. She never wrote a book, never gave speeches, never tried to profit from her story. She simply returned to duty and continued serving her country quietly, training the next generation of soldiers to be ready for their own impossible moments. That's the thing about real heroes. They don't do extraordinary things for glory or recognition. They do them because someone has to, because lives depend on it, because their teammates trusted them to get the job done no matter what. Staff Sergeant Amanda Hayes survived a helicopter crash that killed her entire team. She trekked alone through enemy territory for 4 days while injured. She made a shot that experts called impossible and saved 5 innocent lives. But if you asked her today what she's most proud of, she'd probably tell you about the young sniper she trained last month who just graduated at the top of his class, or the letter she received from one of the hostages she saved, thanking her for giving them the chance to see their family again. So I ask you, have you ever met someone like Amanda Hayes? Someone who did the impossible when it mattered most, then went back to their quiet life without asking for praise? Share their story in the comments. Tell us about the heroes you know who never asked to be called heroes. Because here at Beneath Word Stories, we believe that the most extraordinary people are often the ones who seem most ordinary. They're the ones who show up, do their job, and make the impossible shot when everything depends on it. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to support our channel. We publish stories of real heroes every week, the ones whose names you might never know, but whose actions change the world. And if you ever meet a quiet woman in Colorado who teaches young soldiers how to shoot straight, show her some respect. You might be talking to someone who once made a 2,847-meter shot that saved 5 lives and proved that impossible is just another word for Tuesday. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, remember, heroes walk among us every day. Most of them just prefer to stay beneath the radar, beneath the headlines, beneath the words we use to describe ordinary people who do extraordinary things.